recognized for your round of questions.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. Thank you for our panelists to be here. Good to see you again, Mr. Powner. Most of my questions, I think, are for you. I come from the private sector, so this government stuff here is new to me. And it's hard for me, also from the high-tech industry, so it's hard for me to understand. In a hearing last year in Oversight, we uncovered that Social Security Administration spent $350 million of taxpayers' money on a project that was discontinued. I asked, did Lockheed Martin get paid? Yes. Did anybody lose their job? No. Okay, not like the private sector. Now, in January, report comes out, Veterans Affairs has spent over $2 billion. $2 billion of taxpayer money on projects that were stopped or were failed. Mr. Powner, how does this happen? Just explain this to me in layman's terms so the people in my district in Iowa can understand this. How does this happen?
When you look at the failures across the government, we've looked at most of them. There's a lack of governance and accountability. I can't tell you how many projects, to really the heart and soul, what you guys are trying to do here with CIO authorities, the CIO is not involved with the project. We just reported on an electronic health record failure at the Coast Guard. There was no CIO involvement. There was no one even had any IT background. And the issue here is about the authorities and the span that the CIO has to govern over all IT at the departments and agencies. We need to know where the money's being spent so that we can have the right people involved with the right governance to effectively manage risk. And that doesn't always occur. I'm not saying it's right, because we think it's that's the wrong way to approach it, but that's the reality of what we see with a lot of these failures.
So you're telling me the CIO, Chief Information Officer of an agency like Mr. Washington, in these failures, they weren't involved in these billion-dollar IT projects? That's incomprehensible.
Yes, absolutely, that is the case, that they're not involved.
Is that ending? Has that ended? That can't continue.
Well, I think it's getting a little, I mean, the whole part of FITARA, too, is right to capture all of our spend. We have an initiative with the President's management agenda called the Technology Business Model, where we're going to capture more IT spend. It's not because we're finding every penny that goes to IT. It's because we get the right people engaged with the technology part of things. That's what's really important, that you get the right governance over the technology.
My colleague, Mr. Connolly, asked a great question about the CIO turnover. This would be for anybody in the panel. Is it hard to find and keep really good IT employees in the federal government?
From my perspective, yes. In the 30 years that I've been at USDA, there has been quite a bit of turnover. Some of it is, frankly, a salary scale for a person who's managing, say, a $3 billion IT portfolio, or $2 to $3 billion, depending on the year, like Mr. Washington, would make far more than what the senior executive would make in the federal government. So you have some of that, salary pressure. The responsibilities are more, and as you pointed out, and from the private sector to the public sector, the rules and requirements are incredibly difficult to comply with at times. That aren't really even IT related. So I think there's some difficulty in finding qualified people for these positions.
And then keeping them. Do we have private sector type of incentives to keep Mr. Washington made this a good question for you, to keep people like yourself that are good here in the federal government?
I don't know if there are private industry incentives. I would have to know what those incentives are, sir.
I'm just talking about overall general compensation, job satisfaction.
Mr. Washington, this is a good time for you to ask for a raise.
Yes, sir.
And if
That's where I was heading.
I think it would. I do not think we're compensated as well as our private industry counterparts in terms of the amount of responsibility and accountability that we have currently.
Mr. Powner.
We've seen some very qualified people enter the government because they're into mission and it's a patriotic move and that type of thing. But what's really key here, and it gets back to this reporting, who wants to accept a job as a CIO if you're buried down in the agency multiple layers? You want to report to the top and you want to have the right authorities. So I think it's not going to be about with compensation packages. It's going to be about having a position with the right authorities where you report appropriately and you can really help move the country forward.
And we're changing that. Or maybe we've changed that.
We're going to talk to
Because I agree with that.
The CIO at DOD came, great private sector experience. We can ask him what attracted him to DOD, because I guarantee he's making a fraction of what he made at JP Morgan. But it would be really good to explore with Mr. Deasy on that topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My time has expired. I yield back.